It is another fantastic Sunday here on the Matt Barrie Show, ESPN College Football YouTube channel. As always, the great Paul Finebaum and I each and every Sunday morning break things down. And Paul, I was thinking about it this morning, about how typically I hone in on something with you right out of the gate. I want to go treetops with you first thing this morning after week 7 and just ask you big picture, what stood out to you on Saturday?
Dan Lanning. and I think if you look at it in total, you understand and appreciate his aggressiveness, and he almost pulled it off. But in the sum total of it was extremely negative. I frankly didn't object to his last call. Just try to win the game right.
Yeah.
Too many coaches, play games, and with a 3-yard reception, the game's over. But it was more the calls earlier. He just looked like he was just way too reckless, and his record does not help him. Having said all that, field goal, goes two feet to the left, and we're in overtime. But it really was a confirmation, though, of what I've resisted hearing for weeks, and that's how good the Pac-12 is. And that was my ultimate takeaway, Matt, that they are going to figure large into this playoff race.
Yeah, absolutely. And with regards to Dan Lanning, part one, he owned it in the post-game press conference. He's like, look, looking back, would I have kicked the field goal for halftime? Sure. I made a decision based on the information that I was given. And that just sends me off into a tailspin of a soapbox and a rant, unlike any other, because I am so tired of hearing analytics. I am so sick and tired of hearing about the math. Like, I know what the math says. Okay, so you've got some guy, and I posed this to Mullen during one of our halftimes. I said, head coaches you guys are all control freaks. So why would you cede control of a decision to a guy holding a book of numbers? Because ultimately a book of math means nothing when humans are the one executing it. And so the one before the half, when you were getting the ball to start the third quarter, there was a 2-for-1 situation. And I give him a ton of credit for going in there and saying, yeah, I probably would have done it differently. But there are going to be some coaches. We see this all the time, not just yesterday with Dan Lanning. Lane likes to do it a lot. Coaches around the country trying to do it. They are starting to get to the point where they're relying so heavily on analytics, they're losing games because of it.
Yeah. Lane Kiffin might be the worst. I've questioned him a couple of different times, and he said, well, the numbers told me to do it. I said, well, you lost the game. I still came away respecting Dan Lanning, though. I respect this guy. And at the end of the afternoon, are you going to tell me Washington is better than Oregon? I mean, it was an amazing game. And I think, we've been waiting for it. So I'm pretty fired up to see what happens next with that. I was impressed with everyone in that game. I mean, it's just, a stupid kick decides it. So that was really, conversely, you called it last week. So I was not surprised when I saw what happened in South Bend. I was quite pleased because I'm just sick of this Lincoln Riley trying to act like, the world has changed. I mean, they're a really good team, but anyone who understands college football knew weeks ago that this team was about to blow up.
Yeah, and I'm glad you had talked about it, because we finally got Galloway also buying into the Pac-12, because when you look at this conference as a whole, I don't think it's out of the question to see Oregon and Washington meet up again in the Pac-12 championship. But the gauntlet that's ahead of this entire conference, USC, the only thing they've got going for them right now is that was not a conference loss to Notre Dame, but it exposed everything that we'd been seeing if you'd been watching USC football for the last month. Oregon State beat the hell out of UCLA. You want nothing to do with going up there. When Arizona and Arizona State, respectively, Arizona State challenged USC, they probably could have gotten Colorado. Arizona took USC to triple overtime and then beat the hell out of Washington State last night. And those were supposed to be your 2 worst teams.
Right.
And so when you look at this conference big picture, Paul, I do want to reserve a spot for the Pac-12 in the playoff. My only concern is that it is so even at the top, in the middle, and at the bottom. They might dog each other out of a playoff bid.
They could, and it's not like those of us here in the SEC, we'll figure it out, we'll get there, because there's usually one or two just elite teams that the only chance is that they'll beat each other. But that's not the case. And I readily admit what you guys have been saying. I mean, this is the best conference right now, and it may not be in January because of the carnage, but it is right now. And I still don't know a thing about the Big Ten, but we will know something at the end of next weekend. But it's just so weird to watch Michigan play every week, Matt. And just say, okay, well, they just went out and pounded a miserable team. Well, congratulations.
Yeah, they're like a boa constrictor. They were 33-point favorites against Indiana. They were down 7-0. They were kind of plodding their way around in the first quarter, then in the second quarter, and then you look up, and then they kind of put the foot on the throat, and they just take off. And that was kind of a conversation I wanted to get in with you, because Michigan scored 35-plus points in the Big Ten for the first time in program history, at least 35 in each Big Ten game they played. They smother you on defense. And I look now, Georgia 1, Michigan 2, Ohio State 3, Florida State 4. Of the top 4, if I said, Paul, who do you trust the most in that top 4, what would you tell me?
Georgia, because
really still.
I still, and some of it, Matt, is just I watch what's happening. And yesterday, I don't read anything into that. I mean, you're not getting excited going to Nashville. It's just, let's get out of there. But I cannot trust Michigan yet because I just don't know what they're capable of. I mean, I know Georgia has been into games that they prevailed when things were rough. I know Ohio State has played some tough games.
Yeah.
But some. Florida State, the Clemson game showed me a lot, but they were lucky to win. And the LSU game was so far away in the past that I don't know what to make of it. I mean, I respect what they're doing incredibly. So, I mean, I just feel comfortable with Georgia, a little more comfortable, only because I think at the middle of the season they're starting to turn it on.
Yeah. So it's funny because I'm with you in that you don't really know what the Big Ten is, because Ohio State's the only one that's really had some semblance of a challenge, and that was at Notre Dame, which, by the way, that win looks a lot better now, seeing what Notre Dame did to USC. Michigan seems to me like they're just the one team that isn't capable of stepping on themselves when they shouldn't. And there's still, I know they did it against Kentucky. There's just something about Georgia. I'm just not. I mean, look, Tennessee. They've got Tennessee coming. They've got Ole Miss coming. Those are really the only two spots where they.
Well, by the way, Missouri too. Missouri now is. You have to take them seriously, whether you want to or not.
I said it on College Football Final that Missouri is going to ruin someone's season. They just are. I mean, they just have that look about them. But the top 4 trust thing is interesting because 5, there's Oklahoma. Oklahoma's sitting there. There's Oregon, who should come up the polls. There are so many different teams, 1 through 6, 1 through 7, that, Paul, I could look at and say, you know what? If the college football playoff rankings came out tomorrow and they had Oklahoma number 1 or they had Florida State number 1, I wouldn't.
Yeah, you could, and I've done this as you can stay up very late at night trying to come up with a top 5. And I know you have, but, and by the way, that is really the issue. I mean, maybe I answered it that way because I'm more familiar. I've seen them a couple of times, but there are just so many weird things happening right now. And we're 2 years ago, we had already, Georgia, Alabama, Georgia. Last year, it was all Georgia. Could anybody get near them? And right now, I mean, I have never seen 7 weeks into the season in the CFP era this chaotic.
And I'm here for it too, because the first rankings come out on October 31st, Halloween night. We'll see our college football playoff rankings. There are going to be so many questions answered by then. We finally get a Big Ten game next week in Ohio State, Penn State. Not for this conversation. We'll get to that in just a couple of minutes. But how things move so quickly.
And by the way, I do now know why the Big Ten took Oregon and Washington, because they have so many bad teams in there that they needed help.
So I said this yesterday on social media, and I'd say 80% of the people agreed, 20% of the people had vitriol towards me. But looking at the USC Notre Dame game, I'm sitting here thinking, why would USC voluntarily leave the cozy Pacific coast up and down that corridor to go up into an unpredictable weather situation in the upper Midwest against teams that are going to be bigger and more physical than them? I mean, you're starting to see this play out real time.
Yeah, I'm all for Caleb Williams, whatever, but I mean, we tried to make too much out of USC before the season. They're not the Lakers, okay? And I think some of the media just turned Caleb Williams into his own entity. But you know, he's moved. He's taken. You know, that was a rough night for him in that program. And at some point, Lincoln Riley. I mean, I know the defense played better than the score, but the perception is going to be the same.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, when we look at realignment, we were almost hate watching Wisconsin and Iowa yesterday, because the point total was 35, and we were sitting there in studio, like, there's no way two programs that have a pretty good history can't combine to score 35 points. Well, they didn't, and it was that bad of football. But when you get into the big picture of the realignment, because we're starting to see some of the matchups now, Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA make the Big Ten a lot better. But are those programs going to be serving themselves properly, walking themselves into a November game in East Lansing?
I don't know how. By the way, I was in Knoxville yesterday. I didn't see two programs hit 35 either. I think on the total. So it's. I'm really interested, but Southern Cal, I'm so intrigued by that decision now. Not that they made the move. Of course they made the move, but just, you know, how can they get ready for it? You know, we were worried about Oklahoma. Don't need to be anymore. Texas don't need to be. But Southern Cal is the one that you better be concerned about as they make the move next year.
Yeah, they were the ones that planted their flag in the ground and said, "This is our conference. Everyone's going to go with us. We're in charge." Okay, well, fine, good. Now go make those trips in late October and early November. Quickly, how things can change in college football. I was so bullish that Texas A&M with Max Johnson could be the best team in the SEC West because of the defense. I was all in on them. Their season, again, on October 15th is done.
Over. Yeah, I mean, we've reached this fork in the road quite a few times, and it's the Jimbo Fisher question. And I was led to believe a couple of weeks ago, being in College Station, things were fine. Even after the Alabama game, I was on the set with my favorite Heisman Trophy winner telling me, you can't blame Texas A&M for that loss. That was Alabama stepping up. A&M played really well. And then we saw yesterday in Knoxville against a team that is not elite, Matt. Tennessee, give Josh Heupel credit, the high-flying, high-octane coach, and defense won that game.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, that sets up Tennessee and Alabama, because you're thinking, well, Alabama does just enough to win. They let Arkansas hang around, and that's just when you really look at it, Paul, and you dissect it big picture, that's kind of what it is this year in the SEC. I can't think of one team that's just going to choke you to death. Let me put it this way. I don't think there is one team in the SEC that isn't capable of losing on a Saturday.
Oh, there's no question. And, you know, not to obsess over Alabama, but, you know, on consecutive weeks against, I guess, unranked teams, they won by 6 and by 3. And Nick Saban seems pretty happy because he knows his team is capable of giving it away. I mean, he has now finally reached that part of the season. Everybody's talking about the 5-game winning streak. I'm still, you know, Ole Miss might be the only impressive win of the 5, but, you know, he's got Tennessee at home and LSU at home. These are the 2 games that wrecked his season last year.
One of the probably under the radar games last night was Florida, South Carolina. Shane Beamer had that game won. South Carolina had that game won. Spencer Rattler played phenomenal. They were up 10, I think, with 5, 6, 7 minutes left. Right. And then Graham Mertz in Florida, fourth down conversion, touchdown, defensive stop. Ricky Pearsall touchdown. And Paul, before you knew it, you're looking around, you're like, wait, Florida just won the game.
Yeah, I was watching the Tennessee game after I got back, and I put that game on my phone. It was a little bit dizzying trying to do that. I'm not sitting in the studio like you with 15 TVs, and I really couldn't believe it when I looked down and saw that touchdown. It's great to love Shane Beamer because he had that 8 days last year where he knocked off Tennessee and Clemson, but what's that, four losses? He still has a lot of real estate to deal with this year. Missouri and Texas A&M and Clemson, and he's really on the brink of a terrible year. And for Florida, it was Billy Napier's bookend to the Tennessee game, and he's still not completely clear. I mean, I think it's a good moment with Georgia waiting, but it's amazing that Florida, and you're sitting next to a guy they let go, is literally going crazy over beating what will be probably not even a bowl eligible team in South Carolina.
Yeah, we sat there watching that game. And we're thinking, wow, South Carolina's this could be problems for Billy Napier.
Yeah.
And he escaped South Carolina with a win. ACC, I want to touch on them really quickly because Miami couldn't get over the hangover from North Carolina. And I don't know if it was as much that as they're still not there yet, or that North Carolina, now that they play defense, is someone we have to look at and say,
you're right.
No, wait a second. They might be the team out of that league.
Well, I think we're all shy of Mac Brown's team. A couple of years ago, they had this big run, and then they threw it all away. But this looks legit, and you combine a very good defense with one of the best quarterbacks, and in a league that is really upside down. And I mean, some amazing. I mean, every week you look at ACC scores and you go, "What happened to that program?"
Right.
And
Louisville at Pitt this week. Like what?
Yeah. And I think NC State lost to Duke. I mean, like, okay, I remember when they were good. And I still think it's all about Florida State, but Carolina will be around at the end, I think, and make a difference. And it's so weird that those two. I'm trying to think of some of the matchups we're not going to see until the ACC championship game, and that is the opposite of the Pac-12 in the ACC.
Right. Yeah, they all play each other in the Pac-12, and we're going to see something come down to the end of the ACC. You're right. You might have a team that just syncs up its schedule perfectly for an all-time ACC championship game. But that sentiment that we just discussed, it's kind of the season big picture. Like we're trying to find something or someone, and there just isn't. And I think it's good. I think it's good there isn't a dominant team. I'll take the thing that I said about the SEC one step further. 1 through, 8, 9, 10 of the country, every single one of those teams is capable of getting beat by anybody on their schedule.
And the problem for the SEC, I mean, right now, after Georgia, who is it? Is it Alabama? Is it LSU? Is it Ole Miss? They're all going to converge finally in the next couple of weeks. Alabama has those two tough games. Ole Miss is going to deal with Georgia. Missouri, whether they're the. But I don't want to go back, but and we'll table it because they're off next week. But the Jimbo Fisher story is still one to watch, Matt, because I mean they just it's a $77 million buyout. And I ran into Aggie fans in Knoxville, and every time, they would say, "Hey, why are you so tough on our program?" And I would say, "What do you think about Jimbo?" And they go, "Well, I don't know. he's not. Maybe it's time." I mean, they are not. I mean, I'm talking about just random fans.
Yeah,
that is. I cannot. I still can't believe they're going to pony up $77 million, but
no.
It's still something to keep your eye on, though.
Yeah, that's a lot of money to make someone go away. But here's what, in the coaching world, and college football fans know this because I think by and large, college football fans are pretty intelligent about the bigger picture of what's going on. What SEC fans like to do, and you know this better than anyone, SEC fans will scour the country for a coach that has some semblance of a tie regionally to their program. That's what they do because they're like, well, if our guy's struggling, what about him? Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many times over the last 3 weeks I've come up with Dan Mullen's name at a place like Arkansas. Arkansas fans are always like, what about Mullen? Get Mullen in their calling plays. Mullen, blah, blah, blah. And then the other one that keeps coming up is Dan Lanning. Dan Lanning, well, defensive coordinator at Georgia, learned under Kirby Smart if he gets his opportunity. We're now at that point of the season where some of these programs that are struggling, they're starting to find these connect the dot names to get them down south. And Texas A&M is always one of the first ones.
Yeah, and so Billy Napier's he's not leaving. We could have been talking about him, but Jimbo is the underbelly of that is he's got some really good players on that program. But are you going to say, oh, okay, in his 7th year he's going to get it turned? I mean, this is his 6th year, and he was one of the hottest coaches in the country when they hired him. And the reason he got this extension is that LSU wanted to hire him. It's always worth. I mean, the school. You can say whatever you want, but they were trying to keep him there. And ultimately, the biggest I think the biggest buyout is $21 million. That was Gus Malzahn at Auburn. So it's one thing to pay $21 million. It's another thing to pay $77 million.
Yeah, because at that point, $77 million, you need to come up with that for him and his assistants, and then plus more for the assistants, and then find money to hire a coach that you think could turn your program around.
And I think that is the issue. And you nailed it. I mean, if there was one guy Aggies could say, you know what, we'll do it. We've got to save this program, but there isn't. I don't see a guy. And you can say Deion, but I don't know. I'm not buying that one.
You're up 29-0 at half to a team like Stanford. If you're everything I've been told, you win that game. And
Matt, I don't want to bring the wrath of some of your highest paid talent on ESPN on me, but the biggest loser of the weekend was Deion Sanders.
No question.
I know it's verboten to talk about it, but that was inexcusable. And his party's over. He took a hit, and I'm not really that fascinated by Colorado after that.
Yeah, you look at their schedule. The only winnable game based on the schedule is Arizona, who just beat Washington State. I mean, you're looking at now Colorado 4-8. I mean, the team that was ranked in the top 15 or top 20 and that got all the national.
I'm sure Shannon Sharp will probably come after us. You guys don't know. You don't know what it's like being on the sidelines. No, I don't. I haven't been invited. But you know what? I'm moving on from Coach Prime's late night show.
And we are moving on from week 7 of the college football season. So much to get to, including next week. I'm excited for next Sunday. You've got Penn State, Ohio State. You've got Alabama, Tennessee. You've got some really good games that are going to start shape and shifting the college football playoff picture and the big picture conversation that is a college football season that I don't think you, me, or anyone can put their finger on and say, that's the team, that's the one, that's the winner, which I guess makes this fun for us. For Paul Finebaum, I'm Matt Barrie. Thanks for watching the Matt Barrie Show on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel.
Give me something.